Do 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 do. Hey, how's it going? It's Nancy Gamon. Thanks for visiting. You know, I love to dye pretty kaleidoscopes, but I've gotten into kind of a rut with how I do it. So I wanted to try some experiments today, using the same fold, but trying different ways of applying the color to see how that might affect the finished results. I'm starting with pieces of 100% cotton muslin that have been soaking in a soda ash solution for at least 10 minutes. To create the kaleidoscope fold, I'm going to fold the fabric in half and then in half again. And then picking up just the top fold, I'm going to create a triangle. And picking up the diagonal, I'm going to create that fold as well. And then one more time. Then I'm going to pick up the whole project and turn it upside down, repeating the same folding process on the other side. Picking up the bottom fold, moving it so that it aligns with the other folds, picking up the diagonal fold and aligning that as well, and then one more time, so that I have a long, narrow triangle with two thick folds on one side and lots of thinner folds on the other side. Then I'm going to roll up the triangle, kind of like a cinnamon roll, keeping the edge with many folds aligned as I go, so that that side is smooth and even. I'll use my fingers if I need to kind of coax it into a flat shape. And then I'm going to cover it with a damp rag, wrapping it around and underneath to help the cinnamon roll keep its shape and also protect the fabric from any spotting, since not all of the powdered dye turns to liquid during the ice dyeing process. I've prepared 3 other fabrics already, and I'm going to keep them separate in their own little plastic containers so that I can do a careful job of keeping the results separate and really understanding how sprinkling on the dye affects the finished results. The first thing I'm going to do is to add a layer of ice cubes to all of the little containers. Now it's time to sprinkle on the dye. I'm using Procion fiber reactive dyes, which are specially formulated to work on fabrics that are 100% plant fibers. I'm going to use the same 3 colors on each of the 4 experiments. Typically when I dye kaleidoscopes, I just sprinkle the colors on randomly, so that's what I'm going to do with the first container. In the second container, I'm going to try putting one color on half of the roll, a second color on the other half, and then sprinkling the third color all over everything. In the third container, I'm going to try putting the colors in 3 even rows, one in the center and the other colors on each side. In the fourth container, I'm going to try making kind of a bullseye pattern using one color in the center, sprinkling a second color in a circle around it, and then applying the third color in a larger circle around that. Now the projects are ready to sit overnight for about 22 hours. This will allow time for the ice to melt, the powder to turn to liquid, and the colors to melt into the fabric. All right, let's take a look at our results. I can't wait to see what happens. Here's the fabric from the first container. This is the way I typically dye kaleidoscopes, with the powder sprinkled freely all over. And this is pretty typical of the results that I get. Now here's the fabric from the second container, where half of the dye was sprinkled on one side of the roll and half the dye on the other one. Then the third color was all over everything. And this does create kind of interesting repeating bands of color. The effect is a little bit different from the first one that we saw. Now here's the fabric from the third container, the one where I put the dye on in 3 even stripes. Wow, this really made a strong blue ring around everything. You really have clear definition of the colors radiating out in this fabric. And now here's the last fabric, the one that I did in a bullseye pattern. Oh my gosh! Oh, I'm in love. Look at this green, this olive green in the center of the fabric. How did that get there? I know I sprinkled orange in the center. Oh my gosh, I am in love. This is my favorite one. Now it's time to rinse out the fabric. I'll run it under cold water until the water runs clear, then wash it in hot water with a splash of textile detergent. Rinse that out in cold water. Then let the fabric sit in hot water with a splash of dye fixative for about 20 minutes. After that's rinsed out in cold water, the fabric will be ready to dry, iron, and enjoy. So here's the finished fabric, the sample where all 3 dyes were sprinkled evenly, the one where half the dye was on one half of the roll, half on the other, and the 3rd color sprinkled over everything, the version where the 3 colors were laid on in stripes. This one seemed to keep the colors the purest. The orange is more crisp and clear than it was in the other fabrics. And here's the one with the bullseye pattern that had that surprise olive green in the center. I'm really happy with the results of this experiment. This had been on my to-do list for a long time. It's interesting to me to see how using the same fold and the same dye colors can yield different results just by placing the colors on in different ways. I hope you have fun experimenting too. I'll see you next time. Do 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 do.